G'day people, welcome back to the lab. I've purchased a 2014 MacBook Pro Retina, otherwise known as a A1502, and the display does not work. And I have a feeling it's the display cable. So let's start up all the test equipment and tear this Mac apart. As you can see, when we start the actual MacBook itself, we have a chime, but nothing is on the display, and we have an external TV plugged in the side here, and if we have a look up on the TV screen, we can see that display signal is up. So what we'll do now is we'll flip this MacBook upside down and we'll rip off the bottom pan. We're just removing the last two of the 10 pentalobe screws. They're all the same. They're all around the outside of the MacBook here. This is our final one. Let's flip the pan up. And here we have the MacBook all in its glory. And this is the display cable down here, and we're going to have a look at that under the microscope. This is our little display connector which goes to the screen. We'll just flick up our bar and we'll just gently pull it back, and we can see all the pins here are pretty clean. There's no char marks or anything, and there's no damage around the actual display connector. And we know all the data, all the video data, the screen data is getting to this connector, because otherwise we wouldn't have anything on that TV screen. But there's one critical thing that the display needs, and that's backlight. And that's a light that shines behind the LCD display, and that usually comes in, I think, around pin 1, and that's meant to be around 30-40 volts. So we'll just go to the part of the logic board that generates backlight. This is the area of the logic board that provides the filtering for the backlight. These are 4 big capacitors which hold a bucket of energy to send up to the display, that 30-40 volts. We'll just quickly boot the MacBook up and we'll measure the backlight in this area here, and we'd better give you a multimeter so you can see what I'm looking at. And I think it's the top of this capacitor here. We should get 30-40 volts. And as you can see, we're getting 39 volts. So that means we're getting plenty of backlight voltage going to that connector. So what we're going to do now is break away that screen assembly or display, and we're going to unplug the backlight cable, otherwise known as the LVDS cable, and we're going to have a closer look and see what's happening with that cable going to the display. To detach the screen assembly, we have to unplug the LVDS cable here, detach this hinge, and then working across, detach this hinge here, and then unplug the Wi-Fi cables. So we'll make a start on that now. Just going to grab the plastic, pull the bar back, and then we're just going to give it a bit of a jiggle, pull it out. While we're here, we're going to just remove this cap over the hinge, up and out. Sometimes you'll have a little bit of adhesive here. Pull that out, and that exposes our screws. We now use our T8 to undo the screws. We use our T5 to undo this screw here, and this is just a little retainer that holds the hinge in a nice center position. Now we move to the other end. We're just unplugging the Wi-Fi cables here. This is just to the right side of the fan. We'll put our little tweezer underneath, give it a bit of a twist, and they should just pop off. Nice and easy. Just like that. Back down to our hinge assembly. Again, we'll just put the tweezers underneath, pull it off, get rid of this adhesive. Again with our T8, just remove these screws. Again, we'll remove this retaining screw. We will just quickly disconnect our eyesight cable. We just pull back this little rubber gasket and you'll see our cable here. Just kind of get some pliers underneath, give it a slight pull back, give you a bit of a wiggle, and then grab the cable and peel it back, all the way back. Now our display assembly is okay to break away from our top case assembly. We just break both parts away from each other, bring it up to 90 degrees, give it a bit of a jiggle, and it should just break away. Nice and easy, and it leaves our display assembly free. We now have to remove our hinge cover, and we do that by pushing it out that way and then taking it off. And hold the screen, and just give it a bit of a push, just like that. So the cover actually touches our right side hinge here. Now we lift up our hinge cover, nice and gently, break it away, and just pop it out. On the left side of the screen, we can see our little hinge assembly here, and if we go down, we have some retaining tape. It's just a matter of peeling up from the bottom and pulling it back, just to give this cable a little bit of slack. Back in with our T8, just push this cable over a little bit and just pull that screw out, push the cable the other way, we now remove our screw for our Wi-Fi antenna assembly, and we're going to move our way down to the right. Last screw, just be a bit careful here of our little coax cables. Pull down our little LVDS cable to make it, just pull it clear, and get this little bit of plastic, the Wi-Fi antenna assembly, and just flip it over. Next, we remove this connector here. Really easy to remove, just push back this tape and get our little tweezers underneath the bar and give it a quick flick up. It should break it away, and then gently drag it from the back. This is the new display cable. You can pick these off eBay. All you have to do is type in Apple A1502 display cable or LVDS cable, and they're worth about $15 or $20 off eBay, so nice and cheap. We have our new cable that we're about to plug back in, and we just push that home, and we have a locking bar here, and we just push that onto the other side until it clicks in. We put our Wi-Fi antenna assembly back in place, making sure everything lines up. making sure it just locks down properly. We align our display cable or LVDS cable by putting it on top of the Wi-Fi antenna, putting it up here, so it just rests in that little cradle or in that gap, and then you put your little tape back over the top. Just finish it off nice and cleanly, and we might put our first screw in here just to lock that Wi-Fi antenna back down. We'll work our way from left to right down the Wi-Fi antenna assembly, putting in screws as we go. All the small screws are the same caliber, so there's no chance in getting them mixed up. And our last screw goes in here. Just be careful not to damage that coax again. This is the Wi-Fi antenna we've just put back on, and what we're actually going to do is we're going to do a dry fit. So we've actually put the MacBook over here and the display over here, and we're going to plug the connector back into its little receptacle here, and we're just going to make sure that this metal doesn't short with anything, and then we'll power up the Mac and we'll see if this display comes alive. We'll just get everything all lined up. Make sure it's flat. Just give it a bit of a push, and we'll throw our locking bar over. Right, we'll power up our Mac. We have a backlight and we have an Apple symbol. So that means that the display cable's done the trick. We're just putting the screws back into the left side hinge. We've disconnected the whole display from the MacBook again. Get it to a point where it's kind of locked in, but not tight either, because we have to put in the other screw. And try not to clip this cable. Just keep it nice and loose. Put a bit of slack there. Okay, we'll get these nice and tight. Some people like to put stud lock on the end of the screws. That choice is yours. Tighten this other one. Being aware of that cable yet again. Done. We're about to put our hinge cover back on, and either side of the hinge cover you'll find these little plastic bits. Tear them out of the end of the hinge cover. They're surplus to requirements and they just make the job a lot harder, and they're not really needed. So but basically what we're going to do is place the hinge cover down and shift it to the very right, so it's up against this hinge here, and you want it sloping downwards in that direction and then flattening out. As you can see, we're right up against that right side hinge, and we just want to give it a slight press down and just get it to lock in to its little track. Then work away all along and then shift it to the left. Just like that. And that hinge cover is now in place. Now it's time to bring the screen and the actual top case back together again. One thing is, with your screen, make sure that that hinge cover is equal distance from the left and then the right hinge, and make sure both those hinges are at a 90-degree angle to the face of the actual display itself. So all you have to do is hang your MacBook top case over the edge of the bench, and then bring your display forward and make sure you have something on the ground soft just in case you drop it, and just align both left and right hinge. Make sure all your cables are flopped forward and just allow it to find its way, find its home, and make sure both hinges are well seated in the left and right, and just let your display naturally flop. We're going to secure our screws and the hinges here, 3 here and then 3 here. Most importantly, make sure your left hand is on the battery of the MacBook, applying some pressure, so when you screw in these screws here, you don't accidentally flip the MacBook over the edge of the workbench. So we'll start with these 3 left screws here first of all. Here are our first 3 screws going in. We don't want to do them all the way up, just get them in nice and loose. Remembering to keep your left hand on the battery and some downwards pressure. Okay, so all our screws are not tight, they're just semi-loose, loosey-goosey. On the right side, put in the first screw. On the left side of the hinge. And then what we have to do is we have to get this metal plate over these 2 screw holes, and then put in the next 2 screws. Just put in our middle. Some people like to use stud lock on these, that's up to you. Again, we're not doing them super tight at the moment. We're just keeping everything loosey-goosey. Okay, so those are still semi-loose. We take our MacBook off the edge of the bench and then just put it in the middle of the bench, and then we gently close it up like so. And we want to make sure the MacBook is aligned on the left and right side, and just use your fingers for that. It's aligned at the front and back. Square it all up, flip it over, and once we're happy everything is all aligned, that's when we quickly tighten these 3 screws here and these 3 screws here. So we'll do that right now. We put in the left side retainer. Plug in the display or LVDS cable. Then we put hot snot on the hinge screws. Reheat with 80 degrees Celsius of hot air. Then put on the rubber hinge cover. On the other side, we put in the eyesight or camera cable. We stick that cable to the bottom of the fan assembly. Put in the right side retainer. Then we put hot snot on the hinge screws. Reheat with 80 degrees Celsius of hot air. Then put on the rubber hinge cover. Then we put back the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth cables. They should all naturally go back into their original locations from left to right. Make sure the fan gasket is flat and flush, and all cables are pushed down and flat. Last step, we put on the bottom pan and secure with 10 pentalobe screws. We are all done. At the end of the day, it was fixed for less than $20, and it took less than an hour to complete. As usual, we're going to donate this MacBook to Give It. Check them out in the description down below, who will donate it to a survivor of domestic violence, flood, fire, etc. If you're interested in repairing other stuff yourself, check out the rest of our channel. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Other than that, we'll see you next time in the lab.